They can be in it for many years before they realize they are in an abusive situation. They've already been judging themselves. They have all those questions that they get hit with are the ones that they already have so much internal doubt about.
It can happen to anybody. It doesn't matter if you're rich, poor, black, white, any single woman can go through. Hi, everyone. Shaelene McInnis here with Books and Line Accounting Services and also with the Ontario Wellness Network. Today, I am very happy to have as my podcast guest, Deena Kordt. She is a women's empowerment coach. She is an author, a publisher, a speaker, and a podcaster. Woohoo, like me. She does most of her coaching from the stage and in her books. I would like to ask her, first of all, to share her story with us, and then we'll get some more information about the work that she's doing now. So, Deena, please introduce yourself to the audience. As a reminder to the audience, of course, we will have all of the contact information for Deena, all of her social media contacts. We will include that with this podcast. If for any reason you cannot contact Deena, you can always call us at Books and Line. Contact us at Books and Line. We will be happy to introduce you to each other. Please introduce yourself, Deena Kordt. Thank you.
Shaelene, first of all, I am so grateful and honored to be part of your show and to speak to your audience, because I think the messages that we have are just so important for people to hear. I come from a background that included some abuse, obviously. That's something that I speak about. And I felt alone. I didn't realize that others were in that situation. So my mission is to help others realize that they aren't alone, that there are people who do care. And by sharing our story, they understand why we understand them, why we care, and why we want to help. So I grew up in southern Saskatchewan, right along the Montana border, very isolated, not only geographically from many other kids, even our phone line was long distance from the kids that I went to school with. So there wasn't texting, there wasn't emails, I wasn't on a Snap or anything. It was isolated that way. Also a very strict religious upbringing. So that, I feel, and not everyone might agree, but from my own experience, that programming, I want to say, set me up to keep me locked in to a situation that was not healthy. And then the fact that, I was just kind of the perfect victim. And this is what I've spoken and shared when I've been a keynote at events where it was very focused on helping disrupt the stigma around, talking about it, understanding it, the culture of that's somebody else's business, or that's, that's between them, or it gets cringy and we just, let's change the subject and start talking about the weather or the sports. So to disrupt that stigma, I think it's important to share our stories. And by the perfect victim, I mean, I was isolated from others. I was the oldest child. And so, of course, we kind of learned to parent with our first child. I had 3 younger brothers. So, just the fact that I was naive. We didn't socialize much. I didn't, going to school, I wasn't in any extracurricular activities until a very brief stint playing baseball, fast pitch, later in life. But that, I wasn't out partying. I wasn't seeing the socializing and learning to recognize red flags. So, it was also at home. There was a bit of a double life going on as well. So my mom would kind of say, oh, well, we won't tell dad that because She wasn't raised in as strict a religious background as he had been. So as much as she was, living that way, she would also say, well, we can do this, but we just won't tell dad. We just won't.
Right.
And right away, my ex, when we met, he recognized this, and that was already something, he commented on it years later that he picked up on. So if I was already conditioned to kind of be that way, then I'm probably not going to be talking and telling others about what happens in our home.
Right.
So
very interesting, because we have so much in common, and that's so interesting. But great, I'll go back to that in a second, because really what you were moving from was one isolated relationship. And as you know, when you get into a relationship with someone who is abusive, and people think, oh, when people say things like, why don't you just leave? I'm just like, oh. And again, I try to use the frog in the pot of water. Yep. If you put a frog in a pot of cold water and you turn on the heat, it takes a long, long, long time before the frog finally dies. If you take a frog and you throw them in a boiling pot of water, they die instantly. So it's not that, it's this slow build. So you're moving from one isolated kind of life into something else where you're also becoming into an isolated life. I was just thinking, it's funny because I'm the oldest of four as well. And the long distance calls, calling our friends would be long distance. And it wasn't far away. It was just a long distance. And we had the party line. Did you have the party line?
Oh,
we
God,
had ours was the long ring, the short ring. That was our ring.
We had two longs.
Yeah. Oh, I had a long and so many people don't know what you and I are talking about. I got to tell my kids about this. I don't even think they'd know what a dial phone was. So I got to ask you more. Thank you for telling me about that history. And you're right about the part, the conditioning. Well, that's about family. We don't interrupt in that. Oh no, don't that's between them. Like that. I remember when I was in my 20s, how much that would just drive me crazy. I mean, why is this between them? If it was two strangers and one person smacks another person, that's not between them. Like that's, you'd step in. But because this is usually a husband-wife relationship, then that's between them. And that's something completely different. Thank God we're moving out of that after all these years. So I'd like to speak with you now about, now I know you do conferences. You speak at conferences, you speak at networking events, and then you did some keynote speaking as well. So I'm going to ask you about that kind of speaking and the keynote speaking specifically.
I am very passionate about creating compassion and understanding and disrupting the stigma. And
like that word,
depending on my audience, I can share more or less of my story or just kind of hint towards it. And I always try and find an opportunity, if possible, to lead that way and open that conversation. Now, because I publish a divorce magazine and I have a podcast that talks about that, it naturally opens those conversations. People aren't too surprised for me to interject that.
Right.
My messages are, you aren't alone. There are people who care and want to help. And also to consider in every interaction in life, things are not always as they appear, and everyone has a story.
Yes.
And with that message, I'm hoping to create awareness, curiosity, compassion, because the village that is there to support and help people when they are ready to leave or are looking for a way to leave and a safe place to land.
Yeah.
Especially when there hasn't always been physical violence.
Yes. Yeah.
They don't necessarily understand. They can be in it for many years before they realize they are in an abusive situation. Absolutely. Now, when you try and describe that to anyone who hasn't lived it, they're like, okay, how could you even call that abuse then if you didn't even know you were in it?
Yeah.
So
see, there's the judgment. There's not the compassion. You're talking about the judgment that so many women are afraid of facing. Right?
Yes. And they do face. And they've already been judging themselves. They have all those questions that they get hit with are the ones that they already have so much internal doubt about. Is it really abuse or what? Like all the things.
Why did I stay? Yeah.
Yes.
It's just,
yeah. Why didn't I just leave? And how could I have allowed this to happen? And, I'm a smart, intelligent, whatever.
Yes.
And the shame, the guilt.
Yeah. And it can happen to anybody. Yes. This is the other thing I've tried to explain to people is it can happen to anybody. It doesn't matter if you're rich, poor, black, white, any single woman can go through. And you're right. I've had women actually that I've spoken to who have said to me, I would rather he just hit me than go through all of these years of being told I was a dummy and I was stupid and I was useless and no one would ever want me, because they're over the time, their self-esteem just got so beat down. They were like, it would have just been easier if he just hit me. Like people have actually said that to me. I don't know if you've heard anything like that. I know that I have, but I find a lot of people do judge women when they're considering leaving a relationship, or they've actually had the courage to come up and say, okay, I'm in a relationship that I think is abusive. And there's no reason to kick someone when they're already down. Like that's so easy to do. So many people do that. And I don't know if it makes them feel better or something. I'm not sure what that is, but the next thing I'd like to talk about is, I know you do a lot of work as an author and you're coming up with a compilation. Can you tell me about that? Because I know that my audience would really be interested in hearing about this.
Thanks, Shaelene. Yes, I'm doing in a bigger way what I also do in some of my keynotes, and it can depending on the audience, is to share actual scenarios. Because when you draw a picture for people with a story or a scenario, I took about a dozen short scenarios in my last keynote, and the audience they were enlightened in some ways and shocked, really shocked in others. And in one case, a gentleman turned to one of the organizers and said, oh my God, I recognize my brother in those scenarios. Really? So hopefully that has created some compassion for if his wife then is asking for some support. So what I find is so important, what helped me was to have someone brave and vulnerable who shared the situation that they were experiencing. And I recognized that and thought, oh, okay, so that's not the norm. Right. I don't have to put up with this. And I am collecting stories for a book. I call it Hope in Hell. It's a compilation. It's a collection of stories of women who have been through abuse and experienced violence, and create that hope for others to realize my story will resonate with some people, but maybe not with others. Right. And it's different. And the more stories, the more that we can share and say, hey, I've been there. Now, contributors, there's no buy-in. Some compilations, yes, that there's no buy-in. You can be completely 100% anonymous. I actually encourage that.
Good. Yeah, I was wondering about that.
For safety and also relatability. I think if it's anonymous, then you can place yourself in that story. And people don't have to be a professional writer. There isn't a length expectation or limit.
Just tell your story.
Yes, I have a transcriptionist that if people even want to record it and that's more comfortable, she can take and turn that into written text. So no barriers, and all proceeds from the sales of the book will go back into organizations that support women and families that are experiencing abuse.
Excellent. I'll buy the first copy. Okay. Just put me right down. Okay. But also, so can you share with me, how can people share their stories? I can think of so many women that I hope that they would want to share their stories because they are relatable. And I'd like to specifically speak to these women and say, I'd really like you to watch this specific podcast, because there's part of it that I think that it would be directed towards you. So can you, how specifically would they get that to you?
Any of my contacts that are shared at any way at all, that comes directly to me. And then I can work with them that way, and we'll find the best way that works for them, but that they feel comfortable and safe in sharing their story.
Excellent.
And if it means we sit down like this in a Zoom and we do it in pieces as they feel comfortable, we can even do that. And I can use the, transcribe those notes from there.
Excellent. Okay. That's fantastic. That's really great to know. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm just going to end this up. I'm going to ask you a question. If for my audience, 3 things that you would suggest. So if there's a woman who's considering leaving a violent relationship, can you give me 3 things that you would suggest that she does to prepare for this? Yeah, let's do that.
Definitely. Definitely. Actually, it's interesting. I host on Meetup divorce resource groups, and I've added a 3rd group that is called Hope in Hell, and it's a women's support group. And just yesterday, I hosted one of those, and a lady came on from somewhere in Arizona and is exactly in that situation. So this is really top of mind for me right now. And what I really encouraged her to do was very first step. I have checklists available on my websites. If that's it can really help. An emergency plan. You might not think that you need it right now.
Yeah.
But be prepared, because something, especially the abusers are very intuitive. They feel that mind switch when you are not as, you're maybe standing up for yourself a little more, or you're not as easily controlled, or whatever they sense. They can sense that you are maybe considering escape. Things can really escalate. And some of the most dangerous times are actually after you leave. So there's ways, through this checklist, where can you safely keep important papers, a spare set of keys, a credit card, some change of clothes, like what prescriptions, banking information. Where can you gather? And here's a checklist. Just go through this and do it as you can. So that would be number 1. Create an emergency plan. Number 2, talk to somebody. Share with somebody, if it can be a family member or a close friend, because what that does as well is it turns it into a reality for you that, okay, I'm going to leave, and you feel a little accountability. And you can even go so far, like this lady had done with her sister. If I talk about that I'm going to maybe stay, I'm giving you permission to question me on that and to challenge me on that. And the 3rd thing is to start documenting. If you aren't already, document. So there's a couple reasons for that. 1, that becomes a legal document, or it can be used as proof. But the main thing that's even more important, I think, is in your mind, you keep downplaying, well, maybe I made, or it didn't happen that often, or I might have ticked him off. Or, you keep, why have you stayed there? Because you've continued to kind of put this down and so as when you start documenting, and you realize
it's in black and white,
how frequent and how intense and how damaging and impactful this is, it's an eye-opener. So those would be my top 3 things.
Those
create an emergency plan, tell someone, and document.
Those are great ones. Those are excellent. I'm a huge believer in that. Thank you so much. This has been absolutely invaluable. I'm hoping a lot of people learn from this, and that they share their stories with you. If they have a story to share, I think it's so important. And again, it's confidential. You don't have to say your name or anything, but tell your story, because you are not alone. And this is the one thing that I hear over and over again when a woman is in the process of leaving an abusive relationship, is that they feel that they are completely alone. And they don't realize you're not at all. There's a reason there's all these women's shelters and victim services across Canada and the US. There's a reason for it, across the world for that matter. But so you are not alone. Share your story. Feel free to contact Deena at any time. She'll also be featured, of course, in the magazine. And thank you so much for your time and your information. It was very educational, very important. Thank you very much. Thanks, Deena.
Well, Shaelene, I greatly appreciate the opportunity. And to speak to the not alone, it's an epidemic. It's actually an epidemic. It's been declared that.
Finally.
You are not alone.
Yep.
So let's make some changes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone very much.